waiting on Melissa, or?
I haven't heard it. We might want to wait just a minute.
Okay. Good evening, everybody. I'd like to call our meeting to order. This is the Planning Commission, City of Cloverdale. Pledge allegiance, Commissioner Sanders.
I would love to.
Please, we've missed you. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
You're welcome. You're okay?
Lori, can you
Yes,
hear
I
okay?
can.
Can I have a roll call, please?
Chairman Shanahan,
Here?
Commissioner Acey,
Here.
Commissioner Hoverts,
Here.
Commissioner Sanders,
Here.
Commissioner Waggy,
Here.
Commissioner Springler. She absent?
Absent.
She's an alternate.
Yes. Okay. Okay, we have agenda review. Any changes, deletions?
No changes, Chair.
Okay. Declaration of conflict of interest. Do we have any on the DS? None. Okay, under public comments, under this item, citizens may speak on matters within the Planning Commission's jurisdiction which are not on the agenda. The Planning Commission is prohibited under public meeting law from acting on matters that are not on the agenda. However, the Commission may take citizens' input under advisement, direct staff to place the matter on for future agenda or for discussion and/or possible action, or refer the matter to staff for follow-up. Members of the public may comment on any matter that is not on the agenda, and please limit the comments to 3 minutes. Do we have any hands in the virtual world?
I see none at this time.
Thank you. And we have none in the chamber. So we will close public comments and move on to the consent calendar. Do we have anybody need to poll either of these items, or we're good for keeping them on the consent? Okay. Could I have a motion for approval?
I second.
It was a first by
Wagy,
and a second.
Overts,
Chairman Shanahan,
oh, roll call, please. Yeah.
I'm
caught up.
sorry.
Yes.
Commissioner Acey,
Aye.
Commissioner Holberts,
Aye.
Commissioner Sanders,
Aye.
Commissioner Waggy,
Aye.
passes 5-0. Thank you.
Thank you. Business items, we have none. Public hearing, consideration of resolution recommending a city council zoning ordinance amendments.
Chair, commission members, can everyone hear me okay? Okay. So this is our ongoing process of looking at our downtown TOD zoning and a little bit less, but also office residential zoning. You may recall we received a grant from the state, and the purpose of the grant was to find ways for the city to encourage housing downtown and in those zoning districts. So the way that we do that is we look at our zoning code and try to see if there's any barriers or impediments to facilitating housing downtown. So we have our consultants here, Bruce and Cliff from PlaceWorks. We have a series of amendments that we can talk about in a minute, but first we're going to have Bruce walk us through his presentation about how we've gotten to this point, a little bit about the grant, and then a little bit of review. So Bruce, you want to take it away?
Thanks, Kevin. Can you hear me okay?
We can. Lori, I don't know if you can put up or Bruce, can you share screen for your presentation, or?
I don't have capacity yet to share a screen, but perhaps Lori can make me a panelist, and then I could share my screen.
I did make you a panelist, Bruce. Did you try it again?
I don't see an option to share screen, and I don't see my picture up on the screen. Do you all see?
Lori,
You are?
he's still under attendees. He's not under a panelist.
Oh, I thought I moved him to promote to panelist.
Oh, look at that. Here I come.
I'm sorry. Are you there now?
He's now listed as a panelist.
Okay.
There you
Hello.
go. Thank you.
I have arrived. Thank you very much, and I would like to share my screen first, and I have a short presentation to make regarding this item. Let me get rid of that, and I will go to PowerPoint presentation. Okay, well, thank you all for having us here tonight. This is an exciting project to adjust the downtown zoning in Cloverdale to encourage more development of the type that the downtown will really suit the downtown and fit the character. That was the goal of the project overall. I will talk more about the background and objectives, and we can then either have a general discussion about the zoning code updates, or we can actually walk through the code and discuss each of them in turn. So the commission's pleasure. The components of timeline, we started the project in April. It is getting close to completion. We do have a draft ordinance amendment in front of you tonight. Our next step after this, if the commission does recommend proceeding to council, then the council will hear the amendments in the next month or so. The planning area, we looked at the overall grant for the project was 3 zones, the downtown and as well as the TOD areas. I'll show you the zoning in a second here. The zoning is downtown commercial, office and multifamily, and transit-oriented development. After review with the community and the commission, we actually dropped off the transit-oriented development zone, and so we're only looking at the 2 other zones for this amendment tonight. The project goals are to attract new downtown development in alignment with city priorities, to provide, it's really to look at ways to get housing in downtown, which should help enliven the downtown, create more opportunities for business by having more residents downtown. Also to provide more housing that could provide lower housing costs. So they would be multifamily housing types that would be generally lower in cost. Vibrant downtown and stronger business, and also to put more housing in the walkable city center, which will allow those residents who live there to reduce their driving and walk to destinations and perhaps employment. It is also to help support existing and future transit use. We looked at several documents when we were doing our background research on this project, including the general plan, housing element, zoning ordinance, and other documents that are kind of the foundation of the development in the downtown zones. As I mentioned, we're looking at 3 different zones tonight, except the transit-oriented development in the dark purple is not really a subject of our amendments. When we did our community workshop and we talked to commission, we heard that really we should focus on the downtown commercial DTC zone and the office multifamily zone. So we did that. You may recall that we were in front of you in past months to present some findings that we made, some analysis we did on a couple of opportunity sites in downtown, including this one on Cloverdale Boulevard West. We call it Boulevard West site on the west side of Cloverdale Boulevard across from the plaza. We looked at what kind of development would fit here. We call it a test fit. This development would have some commercial uses on the ground floor and parking behind. Here is an image of the site vacant currently and what it would look like with a potential new building that would be ground floor commercial and residential above. And in this case, we showed 3 stories of this building, 2 stories of residential over 1 story of commercial and parking. You can see some of the data on the right side here, 7 units, FAR of 1.44. I can describe more about that if you have any questions of what FAR actually is, but this FAR means that there is more building on the site than the actual site square footage. So it's about 1.5 times the amount of square footage there is on the ground on the site in the building itself. The density worked out to about 30 dwelling units per acre, 30, a little slightly over. Okay. We also, this is a floor plan showing ground floor, 2nd and 3rd floor. It shows 7 units. Parking is behind, and this parking actually does meet code in your downtown zone with 9 dedicated residential parking stalls and 6 retail parking stalls for that amount of retail square footage, which is 2,400 square feet. We also looked at another opportunity site, which is just south of Cloverdale Plaza, and that test fit also looked at commercial on the ground floor and residential housing above. This is the parcel. It includes the laundromat building. In order to develop this site efficiently, we showed that laundromat building redeveloped, so it would not be there in the redeveloped site. This is a potential image of what that housing above retail could look like. It also included some residential housing behind on the left side. Some of the things we found out in doing this exercise were that we could get approximately 8 apartments above retail, that we could fit 4 townhouses, that the parking would fit according to DTC code with 13 shared stalls between residential and commercial, and 22 dedicated residential parking stalls. You may recall in conversation we had with you about this project, there was not a recommendation to include housing on the ground floor facing Cloverdale Plaza. It's such a busy place. Sometimes there's entertainment. And so that would be a change that would be recommended, to perhaps not have ground floor residential frontage on Cloverdale Plaza. But the idea of having residential on the ground floor in other parts of downtown was thought to be amenable. So what were our findings from doing this initial examination of some opportunity sites? We found that under the existing zoning, that the height limit as existing and the allowed uses for the properties is sufficient to do some good development. However, the density is on the low side. It's currently 20 units to the acre. And if it remains 20 units to the acre, the project that you see in this photograph here would not be allowed. That building there on that pretty small site of a quarter acre is roughly 30 dwelling units to the acre. So we are making the recommendation that the density be increased to allow 30 dwelling units to the acre in the DTC zone only. The building mass above the second floor, so if it is a 3-story building, we recommended that mass above the second floor should be stepped back from the edge, and it would be more in context with the mostly 1- and 2-story frontage that you have in your downtown. And then there could be some minor adjustments to parking, including not only for our project, but in other ways, reducing the requirements for parking for restaurants and bars in downtown. And we'll talk more about that later. Some of the findings, additional findings we found is that residential on the ground floor should be allowed in downtown except on Cloverdale Boulevard. We do not recommend that residential housing units be on the sidewalk along Cloverdale Boulevard, but on the side streets and other streets in downtown, residential at the ground floor would be acceptable. We also make a recommendation for reconsidering the requirements for landscaping in parking lots. These are small sites that we're developing. The parking is required to be internal to the site for the most part in downtown, and is not very visible in any case. So reducing the landscaping requirement is a recommendation we have. And then there are other minor adjustments to the way uses are permitted in downtown that we can talk about more, and that's also included in your packet. I wanted to mention that we also looked at the OR, Office Residential District standards, and there are several places where there's a single parcel that belongs to both DTC and OR districts. It's called split zoning. That makes it difficult to develop. A property owner doesn't know which zone should be applicable. The changes that we're recommending include a change that the OR district parcels that are split zone should be allowed to develop to DTC standards. And we feel like that would not be a detriment to development in downtown or to the OR district. And we also made a recommendation that the parcels abutting the PTC, if they are OR district parcels, that those could also be developed to DTC standards. We would not recommend other changes to the OR district outside of those parcels that just abut the downtown district. So, and I'm happy to answer any questions about that if you have any confusion about what parcels those may be. I wanted to mention floor area ratio. Here's a diagram that shows different ways to approach FAR. It's basically the ratio of the area of the building's floor area in the building to that of the site area. So an FAR of 0.5 or 1/2 could either, as you see in this diagram, could either take up a single story and half the site, or 1/4 of the site at 2 stories would be an FAR of 0.05. And with that, I can turn it over to Kevin or the commission to ask any questions about my presentation. I think I had a next, maybe I didn't have the next steps. I said that earlier, that the next step for us would be to move to city council hearing if the planning commission approves the item on the agenda tonight. So with that, I can stop sharing, and I am happy to answer any questions. We have the actual zoning ordinance amendments available to us, so we can post those online if you want to go over those in any kind of detail. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Bruce. Chair, I'm just going to say something now. So there's a lot of zoning ordinance amendments contained in your packet, and we're prepared to go through each one of them. If you want, we can highlight some, or if you have questions about certain ones, however you want to proceed. But I just wanted to add that not all of the proposed amendments in the packet did come from PlaceWorks out of this grant. Some of them are more related to business operations downtown, and those were suggested by Rafael and I and David, and we went through the use table in particular to suggest some changes that aren't necessarily in line with the goals of the grant, but being practitioners of the code every day, day in and day out, we've had some things that we thought could be changed, and we thought this would be an opportunity to maybe try to get all of those done at once. There's just some things like in the TOD, allowing for retail and restaurants currently are not allowed. So that's one of the changes. There's other things like restaurants wanting to provide entertainment downtown, not requiring a use permit. A use permit would be something that would be approved by the Planning Commission. It's expensive and it takes a little bit of time. So we already know some businesses are providing entertainment downtown, and it seems to be going okay. So there's things in there like that. As Bruce mentioned, in the vein of the goal of increasing housing downtown, we are proposing an increase in density, and I think that probably would be one that the commission would want to discuss a little bit further. There are things about parking in downtown as well. Generally, there's a reduction in the parking requirements. We've lowered the square footage percentage for retail, office, and restaurant. There is an option for residential development downtown or in TOD to reduce to 1 space per unit. Now, the caveat there is that with a use permit, so that would be something that would come to the commission. A developer could state their case on why that makes sense for their particular project, and you would have discretion on that. So that's one of the parking standards that we're suggesting could be amended to increase housing downtown. But again, that's not just, and I'll just caveat a little bit more. Right now, we're talking about market rate projects. These aren't projects that have an affordable component. So these are straight, condominiums or like across from Ace Hardware, apartments like that are not relying on the state concessions that we've heard a lot about, and we'll hear more about later at the second item. So there is an opportunity for a developer wanting to build downtown to reduce to 1 space per unit with the Planning Commission approval of a use permit. That's one thing. In some cases, we have lessened the requirement for use permits for some projects, and maybe, Bruce, we're probably going to end up putting up the all the proposed changes. And as Bruce mentioned before, some reductions in landscaping and parking lots when the parking lot is not visible to the public, if it's, say, behind a building, so they can actually get more parking. So again, maybe, I don't know, Chair, how you want to proceed, but we're happy to go through all of them if that's what you'd like to do, or we can just pull out questions. But either way, Bruce, maybe we can put up the proposed amendments again on the screen if you're able to do that.
Okay. Let's see. Try to get those up. Now, I just want to make sure, I'm wondering where in the table, I think we had a summary table.
You did. It's on the agenda.
Page 40.
Page what?
40.
Oh, good. Okay, thank you. You're right there. Oh, it was right in front of where I was. Okay. So here's a summary table, and as you can see, we also have the text available to us with red lines showing new text and also strikeouts showing where text would be erased. But here is a summary table, and this might be a good place to start if anybody has any questions.
Can you zoom in on that a little bit, so make it a little bit bigger so I can read it, please? Thank you.
Say that again, sorry.
Can you make that a little larger? Thank you.
Yeah, is that okay? Is that visible there?
Perfect, thank you.
Okay.
Just to summarize again what Bruce mentioned, a lot of the housing-related amendments came out of the model buildings that they had put together. The density for downtown, is proposed at 30, but one thing to keep in mind is there's not a lot of large developable lots in downtown. So, just for example, if you put 30 units an acre across a 5-acre vacant parcel, that's significantly more impact than trying to get 30 units an acre on, for example, the one right across from the plaza, that small lot as an infill. So just kind of, you might want to keep that in mind, that a lot of these lots that this would apply to are smaller, which will result in, less number of units just by the nature of them being smaller. So so again, Bruce and his team developed the concept buildings and then kind of worked backwards to say, if we wanted to produce a building like this downtown, what needs to change in the code? And that's kind of what is before you in terms of the housing side. And then the business side that, Rafael and I can answer any questions about those if you have any.
Can I,
Please.
could you just run down what the differences are, or what each of these items are? That there's like a plot plan review, conditional use permit, a PUD, I guess, planned unit development permit, and maybe how they're used, or I don't quite understand how
Sure.
this whole system works.
So a plot plan, P is just permitted, that's outright, that's allowed. The 2 Ps is plot plan, and that's an administrative permit. I guess some way to think about it, it's kind of like a minor design review. Minor design review would be at staff level too, but it's even less than a minor design review, I guess, because we're not looking at design. It's really just, how does the site work? How's it going to operate, with that proposed business there? And things that we would look at are, like hours of operation or parking, things like that. again, yeah, that's a staff level one. I think listed in there as not permitted, so yeah, MP is not permitted. C was conditional use permit, that would require going to the planning commission. So that's, the applicant, it's significantly more money and time for the applicant, instead of, going to staff. And usually we can get a plot plan done in, at the longest, a month. If it drags out, usually I can get them done in a couple of weeks. Or, use permit, it could take them a couple months or, much longer, and, a few $1,000s. So anyway, yeah, that's going to the planning commission level. And then the PU, yeah, go ahead.
So what would you be looking at, or what would the planning commission be looking at in a conditional use permit?
Kind of the same things, that I briefly mentioned there with plot plan, what things that would be in your purview is hours of operation, parking, it should be things like that, traditionally it's like bars. It gives the police an opportunity to look at their security plan, lighting, yeah. And it really, the conditional use permit kind of opens it up to things that it might be kind of out of the box that, say noise, different kind, amplified, if the versus, amplified or just music, if it's going to be amplified or no amplified, if it's, acoustic music versus electric guitar, or even, no live music versus just someone playing music off the stereo, those kind of.
A restaurant the existing permit with entertainment. It's permitted, so they can just have entertainment. They don't need to go talk to anybody. Is that clear?
Depending on what
It was
zone they're in.
changed from a conditional use permit, or is proposed to be changed from a C to a P. I'm looking at this table, 18.05.030-A. Use permitted within commercial zoning district. It's kind of the master.
It's correct.
Yeah.
What's proposed here is that they would be able to do live entertainment without the conditional use permit.
They don't have to go talking to
No, in years past, they would have to come talk to us and say, I want to have live music Thursday through Friday, and Sunday morning. And we'd have to say yes, no, and then we'd have to decide if it was going to be amplified or non-amplified.
So that kind of goes in line with Dave Holt's letter here, where he's talking for easing of the plot plan reviews and conditional use permits. Okay.
Yeah, and if you think about the legend of the permit and PPC, PUD, if you just think of like a TripAdvisor, P is not going to have a price tag, PP is going to have $1 sign, C is going to have 2, PUD is going to have 5. It just, so it's the cost of coming in and doing business or developing that site. And we're looking at kind of lowering that a little bit and making it a little easier to do business.
And just, as I mentioned before, there are businesses downtown
Yeah,
with live music.
there's quite a few doing live
Yeah,
music that
no, I
know.
have never come to us for the
It's,
permission.
I
it's
think it's a good thing.
Yeah, it's certainly, if you have concerns about it, I think what we're trying to do is make it easier for them, and we always have, the way, if it gets out of hand, we feel like we have ways to, rein it in. Please.
Do we know what some of the other towns around here are doing? Hillsburg, Windsor?
Planning Commission, if I can just real quickly, if I can ask Mr. Brubaker to stop sharing screen, we can bring in Commissioner Spengler as we can promote her as a panelist. She is an attendee. Lori, if you can hear me, if you can go ahead and promote. Here we go. All right.
Yay.
All right. Just wanted to bring Melissa in. Melissa, can you hear us?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Bruce, you can go back to sharing screen now.
Thank you.
Thank you.
How's that?
Perfect.
Commissioner Sanders?
Just I'll let the record note that Commissioner Spangler has been promoted to panelist.
So I have a question about this issue with the entertainment in the restaurants downtown. And I was wondering if anybody here knows what some of the other towns in the area are doing in respect to that. Not sure.
I think it's a mixed bag.
Yes, I'm asking if there are towns, other towns in the county or in the area that are allowing restaurants with entertainment without going through the conditional use permit process. In other words, a P or PP.
I'll just share my own, I didn't do any, research about that topic specifically, but just from my own personal experience. It's been a little while since I've worked in Healdsburg, but, I worked in Healdsburg, for a while, and they did have lots of wine tasting, and I remember that, wine tasting and bed and breakfast and things like that were use permits because of, the weddings and parties and things like that, but I don't remember restaurants having to come for that, no.
Yeah, and if the commission is uneasy with it, we can add a footnote that says not amplified. We could say must end by 10 o'clock, or we can add, just build into the zoning those protections. Frankly, again, it has been occurring probably for about a year when there really hasn't been any complaints.
Yeah, First Street's pretty busy.
Mm-hmm.
If you, yeah, I think it's fine if, I suppose if a lot of residential properties develop down there, there might be a conflict, but it's not happening now, so,
It's,
I have another question, though. What about this medical services? It says major medical services are, well, maybe, I don't know. Where is that Alexander Valley? Is it in the DTC or the TOD?
TOD,
Okay, so it just needs a conditional use permit.
which, yeah, it's,
Okay, so I think we should just, you guys are okay with the summary table and the proposed changes, the changing the text, like on page 59, I don't think we need any discussion on items like that. If you guys are okay with just getting to the meat of what we have to look at. And, just the changing in the text of describing what a POD, just on like page 66. Those are all little changes, but, we could talk about them all, or we could just go into the big changes, the site development standards, the things like that that we're really looking at. I don't know how you feel as commissioners, what you want to do.
Yeah, that's fine with me. I do have a couple other questions about
yeah.
some of the things that Mr. Brubaker has discussed.
No, I want to get to all that, but I don't want to have to be talking about all the changes of the text if we didn't like that line, or
Right, sure.
just so we're on the same page of what we're doing. If we're just going to look at the proposed changes here that are in front of us, get to the meat of the big changes. So, questions away. If you have any.
Anyone else?
I do have some questions. So on the reduced parking requirements, so we have a DTC, which is the downtown commercial zoning, the office multifamily zoning, the transit-oriented development zoning. So all three of those zones want to reduce parking. I just need clarification, because when you have the density bonus law, it automatically, if they take advantage of that, it reduces the parking. So maybe downtown would be okay to reduce the parking, but what about the office and the transit? I'm mostly concerned with the transit area in reducing parking, because, again, if you have that density bonus, you can use it. I don't know what's going to be developed there. So can you talk a little bit about that?
there's, Bruce, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think there's any reduction in parking proposed for office residential. I think it's downtown
That's
and,
right.
yeah,
There's
so,
not a proposed reduction in parking
yeah, so,
for TOD at all.
yeah, so office, there's no proposed reduction. It's for
There's
the,
not, okay.
yeah. But it, again, if, just hypothetically, if an affordable project came in, we'd be having the same discussion that we've been having for the last 9 months. They would ask for the concession, and we would be, really obligated to grant that. This would allow them to reduce parking to one space per unit, but it has to come before the planning commission, and it's a discretionary decision. If they could build a case why it works in the area where they are, then you would have the ability to grant that. But if you weren't satisfied, then you could condition the project a different way or require more, have them come back. I know, Bruce, or Rafael, is that?
Yeah, I'll just also say this change, I guess it's not, it's something that was existing, it's already, existing in the code. It's just we're taking part of the provision out, and the provision starts always, how it reads right now is how it read before, and it starts out saying, with the use permit approval, parking for the residential portion of a mixed-use project may be reduced to one space per unit. Now it ends right there. Before, it continued on to say, provided that the square footage for each floor of residential use shall not exceed twice the square footage of first floor commercial. And the reason we took that out is because now we want to allow some residential on the first floor, so that part, it didn't, that was in conflict with the rest of that code. So again, this isn't a new thing, it's just so this process already, existed. This is something that they could have asked for. It's just that now, because we're allowing first floor residential, we just had to amend this code to fit the first floor residential. So I guess if you think about it, it's not a new thing, it's just.
Right, I see that now.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, the other question then is the increase in maximum allowable density. So that one is for the downtown area, which to me is okay, but the TOD, that one I have a bit of a concern because they could also use the density bonus on that one, right? And then if they did, so if we were to increase it from 20 to 30, and then they use a density bonus, they can increase it again, right?
Correct.
Yeah, but maybe I could be wrong, but I don't know if it's fair to bring affordable housing projects into these kind of arguments because they're going to get that anyway. This is more for, in my eyes, this is more for market rate because they need that help. Right. An affordable housing project, no matter if we had 100 spaces per unit, they can come in and say we want they want that to be waived. Whether it's 100 or one space, they can ask for it to be waived no matter what it is. So I don't know if it's fair to bring them into this conversation because again, I don't think it affects them. It more affects the market rate projects because
But your premise is correct.
Yes,
If
that
they're
was-
starting at 30, they could go higher.
Exactly.
That's,
And that's my concern is because,
it's not parking.
you're 20, and I understand.
Yeah.
Maybe not all of them are going to be affordable housing, but they do have that opportunity that when they're from 20, they go to 30, now I'm going to use my density bonus, and that's going to increase it. And that's one of the things that we're debating right now and talking about is all this enclosed density, So that's just a concern of mine. So on that side, I'd rather leave it at 20 on the TOD side of it, but I don't know how my commissioners feel about that.
I'll just say this about density also. I've had, I've had architects, sometimes bring this up that, we have a pretty high floor area ratio in our city. Most cities I've worked in for just residential, we have like a 40% floor area ratio. That's pretty high. And we don't have necessarily a really high density. And so how that works, how that computes is, you basically are saying that people can build, you're allowing a bigger unit, and because the density isn't that high, they can't divide that floor area into multiple units. They only can divide it into a lesser number of units. So you're kind of encouraging development of larger units, which would rent and sell for more higher prices. If you increase the density and we're keeping the floor area, you're kind of, by, another way, encouraging less expensive housing because they can divide that floor area into more units. And, the smaller units will sell for less and rent for less. So, that's
Yeah,
one argument.
If I can just add, So Raphael, I just wanted to clarify, and maybe this is not something that was assumed, but we are not making changes to the TOD.
I think that was a staff, that's a
in
staff.
density. It's only the downtown.
It's in there, Bruce.
Yeah, that one was on us, Bruce.
There's other constraints that,
But didn't we make a recommendation on page 64 of the packet that says it's going to 30 instead of 20?
that's correct.
Yeah, yep.
It is proposed at 30, but we're debating it. I think there is,
For the packet.
yeah,
Page 60.
yeah, page 60.
Way past.
I must be past. Maybe that's wrong.
Right above where you're in your zonings, where you had the little red lines on the different Cloverdale zoning stuff. But on that one, it was on page 50 or 60 of that. So if you go down a couple more,
It's the PDF number,
This
Bruce.
is the use table, and then there is a.
There it is.
Okay.
they change the
Oh,
TOD.
so I stand corrected. So TOD is shown as increasing density. That is, I apologize. I thought we were sticking with DTC. It is showing the density change to TOD, and that is subject to your discussion for sure.
I had a follow-up question on that. We had a recent item brought to us about the TOD that's over off of Asti Road, and you had done in your study, at least you highlighted that as one of the areas. Do you have a report out of what your recommendations would be for that use of space?
We did not look into that as because it's a large enough site. We felt that that's going to be a whole separate process with environmental review and so forth. So we did not look carefully at that site to come to any conclusions about the appropriate use of this.
When you're in an area like that, if you're coming from such a rural or a large residential lot size down to a TOD space like that, what is your normal recommendation? Do you have a multifamily that is 3 stories tall next to a rural area, or do you promote kind of a combination of commerce and residential and lessen the residential amount in that area? What's your professional opinion on that?
Well, professional opinion. So the market right now is for housing. There is a huge need for housing. It is actually a pretty good site for housing, I feel, especially if, transit eventually gets here. But even if so, it is close enough to downtown to walk or bicycle to downtown. And it is a site that is it's not really next to others, small, single-family residential or kind of less dense housing currently. So I don't think it's such a bad site for something that is a little higher density, personally.
And then my last question that you actually said into that is, I couldn't find in your study an evaluation that compared the value of, I know we're in a housing crisis and we need to add housing all over the state. But at the same time, we're in a city crisis where we need to be able to afford our own little utilities and road repair and small things as a small city. And our commerce really hasn't flourished yet since the diversion of the 101. So my question is, in your experience or in this study, is there somewhere that explains the value to the city by housing and adding a person to the community versus adding a business to the community, or kind of trying to do a combination of both?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's a good question. I mean, frankly, development, though, follows the market. And so if the market is for housing, then that's what wants to happen. The market could change, and there could be a greater demand for commercial. But generally, we find that developers want to go where there's a market, and the thinking is if you add rooftops in a downtown or close to downtown, then that's going to make the downtown businesses flourish because there's more people, utilizing those businesses. In terms of the fiscal impact on the city, most cities have impact fees that cover, education and parks and infrastructure and transportation. And and Kevin can talk more about this, but my presumption is that those fees are adequate to cover the additional services needed by those housing units. Every place we're working right now would love to see more retail because that's tax dollars to the city. It's just right now, retail is changing, as you know, as all of us know. We see that the nature of retail is changing. And so every place is kind of struggling with this issue about how to attract more retail. And what we're saying is that one way to do it is to provide more, more people who want to use retail and therefore housing.
Anything additional, Chad?
No, that's all I have. Thanks.
Thank you.
Maybe down the road, cities are going to have to come up with a different. Maybe down the road, cities are going to have to come up with a different. Do I have to turn it on? No.
It's on, it's on.
A different way of generating revenue other than tax, sales tax, because of the Amazons of this world and all their ilk. It's definitely something that long-term study, but I think it needs to be probably needs to be looked at.
Okay. Yes.
I have another question. When it says reduce landscaping requirements, it's going to be for all of the three zones, the DTC, the OR, and the TOD. My question is, what does reduce landscaping look like? What does that look like? Because when I see Cloverdale, as I get off the freeway, that TOD section is that brown section. So when I walk in, when I drive in, I'm going to see all of Cloverdale, and it's going to represent what Cloverdale is. And so I kind of want to know, what does reduced landscaping look like?
Bruce, you want to take that one?
Yeah. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but again, here I'm thinking that we're only calling for reduced landscaping in the downtown DTC zone, and it's only where you have internal parking lots.
Yeah, correct.
Where there would be a building along, say, Cloverdale Boulevard and parking behind. And we felt that the trade-off there would be sufficient to take space. Maybe I could go to back to my PowerPoint. Bear with me. Let's see. This site, for example, Cloverdale East concept, if you can see that, we have if Cloverdale Boulevard is here where my cursor is, and these retail sites on the ground floor face Cloverdale Boulevard, the parking is actually behind those sites and not very visible from Cloverdale or any street. In fact, there's a building down here. So we don't see the great need for visual softening of the parking because it's internal to the site. And so that's really, and you're losing the capacity for parking when you have a significant amount of landscape required there. So that's why we wrote it to be really specific, to be internal lots, not very visible from the street, and only in the DTC zone.
Also, the maximum parking lot size would be 30 spaces, so it couldn't be on a gigantic parking lot.
And also, I'll just throw into, with, LID, low impact development stuff nowadays, oftentimes they have to put, and what that is, essentially, when, say you got a vacant site and you cover it up with paving in the building, and LID talks about, it's about drainage and, how does water flow onto the site and get into the storm drain system. And LID it requires that the site has to capture the rain on site, the storm water, and, kind of over time let it, soak in. And anyway, and a lot of times nowadays, you'll see parts of lots, you've seen them, you walk by them all the time now, and don't even realize it, but they're LID features, and they're required by the state water board. And so, on top of us requiring landscaping in the area where they have to legally make these bioretention areas anyway, it's like they're going to be putting landscaping for the bioretention stuff anyway, and the LID stuff anyway, and us making them put in a small strip of, whatever here and there, a couple trees. It's kind of counterintuitive, I guess, and with the drought, and it's like Kevin said, it's not really big parking lots. It's going to be small ones in the downtown area, and when you're dealing with small parking lots, they don't have a lot of places to put those LID features anyway. So it seems like it made a lot of sense for a lot of different reasons.
And just to add to that, Raphael, I think you're making good points about LID. Where you have larger sites and where you are away from the downtown, so in the TOD district, those parking lots are likely to be larger and they are likely to not be so hidden. And we fully support landscape requirements for places like those.
So do we have to clean up the wording in the resolution?
Uh-oh, what did I do?
DTC, TOD, and OR for reduced landscaping.
Raphael or someone, can you tell me which page number I'm looking for that?
Page 38.
30?
38.
38, thank you. It's a little hard to hear.
Yeah, the bullet point shows DTC, TOD, and OR.
Oh, shoot. I really apologize if that's the case.
Yeah, so we might want to clean that up.
Yeah, we can amend.
Good catch, Chair.
Okay.
I mean, the section that it's being proposed in the zoning code, at the very top, it does say, the following provisions shall apply only to uses located in downtown and OR. So that's 18.11.080. Then it goes on to say the new provision E. So I think, honestly, I don't know that there's any ORs that are even that big, but we'll
Yeah, we'll edit it anyway.
Just a safety,
no, it's a good catch. Thanks.
safety catch. 'Cause
Are these spaces subject to the requirement that they be covered, these parking spaces?
no.
I didn't quite hear that.
Are they required to be covered parking spaces? And we said no.
Do we have any discussion on first floor residential uses on the boulevard behind first floor commercials uses? So we're all good with that? Okay. Reduced parking and DTC and TOD. We've briefly hit on that. Do you have any comments?
I do have one other question regarding that issue, and I just want to clarify, we're only talking about residential units in the DTC and TOD districts, right?
Are you talking about parking?
Parking, yeah, for the one space per unit minimum?
Yeah, that's correct. Although we are proposing a slight reduction in parking requirements for businesses in the restaurant and retail and office. The ratio right now, in my opinion, is pretty high, one space per 100 square feet. So if you got a restaurant coming in downtown, I mean, that's going to be a ton of parking. So this is more in line with, I think, what people are generally doing. Bruce, I don't know if you had any comment about that. I know it's kind of out of your housing arena, but can you speak to our proposed commercial parking reduction proposal for the square footage for restaurant, office, and retail?
Was that for me, Kevin?
Yeah,
Yeah, sorry. Okay. Yeah, I fully support the idea of allowing new uses to move into a space and not have to provide off-street parking to the extent as the code currently requires. It makes it difficult to for new enterprise to move into spaces when they have to provide off-street parking. So that's something that many cities do.
I mean, the classic example is the bank here. You know, it's a great old building. We would love to see something go in there, but the building covers the entire lot. So it's going to be really hard for them to provide on-site parking. But it's a little different from what we were talking about, but
Yeah, that's impossible, right, for if
Right.
you have 100% lot coverage. I just wanted to make sure that the language in there wasn't confusing for somebody that comes along later and tries to ask for a single parking space for a unit that is going to be used for commercial purposes.
it was.
I know that sounds silly, but.
No, it was residential.
Right.
Back to your original question, it was pertaining to residential.
Okay, thank you.
Chad, anything? Okay. Okay, so we move on to, if we're okay with that, allow restaurant uses in the TOD along approval of plot plan. That seems like a no-brainer to me, but, are we?
Odd, it's not in there already.
Right.
Okay, we talked about reduced landscaping, so we got that bullet. Increase maximum allowable density of DTC and TOD districts.
I don't think the TOD, we should increase it, but that's just my
Yeah,
opinion.
and I'm on the opposite side.
Opposite side, okay.
I think that would give an opportunity for some of these smaller sites to get moved onto and somebody could do something with them. Do we have any other comments on that? Commissioner Acey?
None on my end.
Commissioner Waggy?
Would that have any bearing on the Asti Road development? Since they already have a concession?
No, it's affordable, so,
It's affordable item.
yeah, it's,
No, but I meant just, okay.
No, this code, they're going through the process now, and this hasn't, this wouldn't take effect for a couple months, with timing and whatnot, so.
But hypothetically,
Hypothetically, anything could happen, but, yeah, they could withdraw and come back if we
Right.
change it, I'm
If they
sure,
come back.
anything's possible. but,
well, I was just trying to remember what their concession was, and then if the zoning is whatever this one is now, I mean, if it gets changed to this lower requirement,
I'll just throw this out there too. I don't know if anybody has read the station area plan, but speaking of that project is the only project that we have, that's been submitted to the city that actually would do what the specific plans, the goals of that plan set out to accomplish. And if you read in that plan, there, when we developed that plan, we did a whole market research, paid some firm to do research study, and one of the things that they said, and it's in the plan, they said that the most likely project that we would get is an affordable housing project on that site. So, if we're trying to discourage more housing, our site, the project, the plan that we came up with basically said we should expect this kind of project. So, I think we should increase the housing. That's just me, and we have a study that says we should expect these kind of projects. I don't. It seems counterintuitive to me to do otherwise.
no, I'm just trying to understand the math, if you will.
Yeah.
If it gets changed to this, does that set a new basis in which they can then apply a concession and get even less parking?
Well, I'd say no, I guess, because they're going for a parking concession anyway.
That's what I mean.
We could
There's this-
change it, and they could just readjust their concession and say, they're asking for the same thing, but just different numbers.
But is their concession dependent on on the zoning they're dealing with when they start a project, the zoning that's on that site right now? Or is their concession just some independent number they came up with that said, forget your zoning, we want this number? or is it some percentage of the actual zoning requirement?
As far as I know, they can ask for whatever they
Yeah,
want.
Okay,
yeah.
that's what I was looking for.
It's kind of irrelevant.
I mean, one of the constraints, just say we said 100 units an acre, but we still have a 3-story max. So there's other things that would box a project in regardless of what we would, and frankly, I don't really see developers in the Cloverdale market not wanting to provide any parking. I mean, it's typically something that they want to provide, and it makes their project marketable.
Yeah.
And so it may be reduced, but
Yeah, I just sat in on a webinar last week on parking, and, this was a bigger picture, big cities, but, I mean, there's cities that are just, they're taking away their parking, and because they're letting the market, do it. And, knowing that kind of what Kevin just said, that developers aren't going to build something that isn't going to succeed. So, anyway, that's an extreme example, but some cities aren't even worrying about it because they're just, letting the market do it, and it seems to be working out.
San Francisco's
Oakland,
taken
yeah,
away,
Berkeley.
they've taken away the parking completely. It's
Yeah.
not even an issue. A builder can offer it or not. It's not an issue for them. If they think they could sell the building without parking, get residents in there without parking, they're taking a shot.
Well, that doesn't necessarily mean that we should follow their
No,
lead
no.
on that issue.
No, not at
Parking
all.
in Cloverdale is an important thing because, we're kind of a remote community. And so there's a lot of services that we need to travel for, and the mass transit really is ineffective here. So parking really is a huge issue.
Are we going back to the reduced parking requirements?
No,
That'd be, okay.
No.
Okay. Okay, so density, where are we? Are we good at 30? Do you guys want to straw poll it down to 20 again?
I'm okay with
Come up with
30.
another number?
well, I think we can probably talk about it for a little bit.
Yes.
Right, I know that some of us here think that maybe 30 is too much for the TOD, right?
I think it depends on the location of TOD. I think that we have odd TOD spaces that don't fit the normal city's TODs. TODs are normally meant to be put right next to a mass transit. Commissioner Sanders, you said it, we don't have mass transit here. We won't for probably 5 to 10 years. But when there is mass transit, TOD and affordable housing work beautifully together. They're so great for each other. The problem I have, and I worked in homelessness for a few years with the county, and I really believe in the quality of life can help people to get out of cycles and get some stability in life. And so to put affordable housing in trying to max the density in a small space that's unsafe around it, and then also right next to a rural, so there's really no buffer, there's no transition. It's not a good quality of living. And I also think there's no supportive services there yet. So I think the timing is wrong, but I do think the TOD and affordable housing need to work together. I do believe that the density is not really an issue in TOD, except we have an odd TOD space that's really not TOD yet because it's not near mass transit. It's near some vacant railroad tracks and a lumber yard and a freeway.
maybe we can try to separate the Alexander Valley Apartments project from our discussion now, because we're really
Talking about
not,
the
we're not talking about
We're
that
talking about
tonight.
marketable.
Marketable items.
I know it's hard not to, but
No, but when you're talking about the other TOD spots, like in the downtown area, you should look at that density. I think it fits within, and I think it works. I think that we should hopefully have developers in all of those areas add some kind of commerce though to each of it, because I think it adds supportive services that we need in all of those areas, even down on Asti or wherever. We need more supportive services. We don't have enough businesses in our town to meet the needs of our community. That's why we're always shopping in Windsor. We're shopping in Kaya. We don't have anything here. So we need more commerce here in strategic ways, but how do we attract them? I think it needs to combine with housing And I love the aspect of using the TOD that way, especially over by the Alexander area.
I think we're talking about, do we want to encourage 30 or go with 30 for TOD or 20?
You on board with that?
So I'm in support of 20, but, So-
Keep it at 20 where we're at.
We can, whatever your recommendation is, we'll bring it on to the council.
We have a consensus?
Well, personally, I don't have a problem with increasing it to 30 in the TOD, but that's just me. I think that the more we allow increased densities in those areas, the more we're gonna be able to bring more people into housing. And I know that's probably not a popular stance, especially in Cloverdale right now, but, you know, the bottom line is that we really do need more. And so by allowing increase of density in those zones, we're going to be able to allow some of that stuff to happen a little bit easier moving forward. And so that's the reason why I don't have a problem with allowing 30, but I'm just one person.
Yeah, well, I'm on board as that. That's my opinion as well. It makes it easier to get these
Right.
lots developed.
Right.
You know, get some retail going in there, and get some apartments upstairs and in the back. To go for me.
Yeah, I agree.
Commissioner Acey, are you on the same feeling, or are we?
Well,
at
I
three
also,
to two
you know, I
on that?
believe it's a tough subject that no one wants to add anything to our town, but we all know we need more. And we need more housing. We need more affordable housing. I love that you're thinking affordably. I love the strategies. I said this before when you presented this to before, the downtown design of backing off the top spaces. I appreciate that. I think that's brilliant. It reduces the size, the view of the size, and that's a recommendation that we should make on all of these types of properties, just so that we can kind of reduce the visual impact it could have on our community, but at the same time providing housing. I kind of have still the little heartburn about the spill out onto the plaza. I don't really like on slide 16 how you have those townhouses that spill out onto the plaza, just because I know how our plaza is. And I think it'd be better suited if you had retail there rather than a home that spills out there, because that home is going to have a new member of their family pretty quickly in that door. But other than that, I think it's a beautiful recommendation. I kind of wish, just because you recommended this before, and then we had this TOD project come to us, I kind of wish I could hear your recommendation on those TOD sites, just so we could have a better insight on your grasp of things. But I agree with commercial/residential, and I agree with the use of space downtown, the reduction of all of the parking, and that fits with the models of what we need to do to bring some more, just more activity to our downtown.
Thank you.
Oh, by the way, I live downtown too, so this is my backyard, and I'm all for bringing more business and more people to the downtown. We can still do this and do it beautifully.
Oh, yes. So, looks like you're one stand.
I know, so, I mean, I'm okay with the downtown area, but the TOD, I'm really just concerned because I know that we really don't know what's gonna be out there, you know, if
Yeah,
it was
but think about
commercial,
marketable
yes,
marketable
that'd be
items.
great, you know,
Think
but,
about
yeah.
condominiums, townhouses, things like that. Don't think low-income housing.
And that's what my
yeah.
concern is, if
Yeah.
it's low-income housing, you know, and,
It's not gonna be that.
yeah, so that's where I'm at, so.
And the net effect probably is very small in terms of how many actual,
Very few lots.
very few lots,
Yeah.
and they're pretty small. So
Yeah.
you're not going to get a lot of more houses on
Yeah.
there or anything, dwellings of whatever sort.
Okay, so we're gonna be keeping it at 30. Sorry.
Oh, no, that's okay. I just would like to see, what would that look like if you were to do that? Like, say, for instance, we were to have a development, how would that look like 20 versus 30? You know, if I could visualize that, what is that difference, you know, because 10 units more, how does that,
Yeah,
if I could
it's
actually
really about a
see.
good design.
Uh-huh.
I'm trying to think of an example. Do you know in Windsor on South Shiloh Road, there's a couple of projects across from the park there, and it's kind of an obscure reference, but I happened to work on those, and those were 30 an acre. I don't know how, I mean, maybe we can come up with something for a later date and just
Yeah,
kind of.
a later date, that's
Just
fine.
to show you some examples. It really is about design.
And having the setback now for that third floor is a nice,
I love
option.
that. Yes, I love that. I wish they could do that for the TOD side of it, too.
okay. So next bullet we have is allow pedestrian-oriented retail and general retail uses in the TOD. You have any discussion on that, or?
I like it.
Okay. Any comments, Chad?
Yeah, by my mute button, but I like it as well. I think commerce in that area needs to go hand in hand. I think we need to not just be on just our Cloverdale Boulevard only.
Right.
I think we need little pockets of support in other areas. So mini mart type commerce would be great to have some more food spread around or some more services.
Melissa, you've been quiet. Anything out there?
Chair, you might repeat yourself.
Melissa, you have any comments that you'd like to make?
Not at this time. I'm kind of on board with everybody else and their opinions of it. I like the idea of adding the housing down there with the businesses below. And I wholeheartedly agree that we need more housing, and I think that these are some good locations to do that, to bring some more residential units into the downtown.
Thank you. And then we have expand opportunities for personal and household service uses in the TOD. Any discussions?
What does that mean exactly, personal and household services such as what?
It's like dry cleaning, barber shops,
Nail salons?
yeah, things like that.
Okay.
Nothing, no big furniture stores.
cutting.
Need services?
I think coffee shops fit in that too.
Yeah.
Delis.
Yeah, getting a cup of coffee and a shave, maybe a shoe shine. Sounds great in a TOD, right? While you're waiting for the train. Yeah.
Okay. So, we're all good with the bullet points. I want to take it out to the public and see if we got any public comment on this item. Do we have any hands showing?
Hold on 1 minute. I need to stop the sharing of the Bruce. Yes, I do have some hands.
Okay.
Debbie Howell.
Hi, this is Debbie House. I really like the presentation and the idea of the housing downtown. I think that's a great idea. I do want to say that if the person typing could mute, we won't hear you typing. Then maybe we can hear the people speaking a little bit better. But other than that, I thought it was a great presentation, and I really applaud the creativity.
Thank you.
There's another hand. It is Dave Holt.
Dave?
Go ahead, Dave.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
We can hear you,
Okay.
Dave.
I'm sorry, can you hear me?
We can hear you, Dave.
Okay, thank you. Sorry for the delay. Yes, I'm a resident of Cloverdale and also in downtown and have a building. And I applaud the work towards reducing some of the regulations. I did write an email, and I would like to highlight the point of there's I don't know the exact history, but there's a parking lot on Lake Street, and I believe it was there because of the apartment building and the commercial building on the corner across from the Dante. That parking lot is vacant, and that was a regulation. If that was a regulation required by city requirements, it was all for naught. So I think sometimes we overanalyze what we're able to do here. Thank you very much, commissioners, for being there, but I think that in terms of the TOD, in terms of the parking, I think if we just let it go, someone said, I think it might have been Kevin, developers won't build anything that won't succeed in their mind. And if they need parking, which is from an appraisal, a value standpoint, parking is something that people look at when they develop something and when the bank finances it. So I think it will somewhat cure itself. And then in terms of TOD and the density, I don't know how many large parcels there are within that district, but it's fairly small. I think the density is not that big of an item. I would wholeheartedly say go for it in terms of greater density. Yes, any train or any mass transit is 5 to 10 years down the road. Any development is probably that far as well, and it probably won't happen that quickly. So I would like to see a lessening of rules and regulations, and I probably exceeded 3 minutes by now if there's any timing. But I would applaud what you're doing. It's a reduce restrictions. I would my one statement, my closing statement is going to be from a government standpoint. Let's not, when we get a new project, let's not look for the reasons to say no. Let's look for how we can say yes. And that means an easing of regulation. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other hands?
I see no other hands.
Thank you. Okay, we'll take it back to the commission. Do we have any additional questions for Bruce? On anything? We're all good? Yep. Please.
I'm not sure if this is an actual fact, but I understand from talking to people in town that if one wants to open a restaurant in a space was never a restaurant, that there's a substantial, like $100,000 hookup fee for the sewer or something like that. Is that correct?
Straps, yeah.
So
I couldn't tell you if it was 100, but it
would cost them about
Commissioner
that.
Sanders might know. It's expensive, and it's.
So is that a fee to the city or something the developer has to provide?
The developer would pay to the city for their use of the sewer system. It's for ongoing use of the sewer and the maintenance and the impacts that project has put on the system. And typically it's a grease trap, or in the case of, a heavy user like the Bear Republic, they'll be required to submit reports on what they're putting down the drain, so we know how to handle it, and sometimes they pre-treat it, but that's.
Well, it seems like an initial substantial barrier to anybody opening a restaurant. Maybe down the line, I don't think that's a zoning issue, but down the line that could be looked at or something.
Yeah, and
I mean, we can provide the ability for somebody to go, but a small outfit going into a virgin space that has to fork over 100,000, that's gonna stop anybody from doing
I'm
anything.
gonna put 50 grand in the air handling. So,
Yeah, but
yeah,
still.
it's
I
a
mean,
pricey
it's-
opposition.
It's
to-
huge.
To go into
and,
a place that's not a restaurant and to build it into a restaurant, you gotta have deep pockets. It's
so-
a very expensive proposition. So, any other discussion with us on this before I ask for the questions? Well, good, Chad, you good? Melissa, thumbs up?
Good, thanks. I'm good.
No other comments.
Okay. So would somebody like to make the motion on the resolution 010-2021, which is on page 38?
Sure, I'll move to pass the resolution number 010-2021, a resolution of the City of Cloverdale Planning Commission recommending to the City Council the adoption of an ordinance amending Cloverdale Municipal Code, Chapters 18.05, Commercial Zoning Districts, Chapter 18.09, Special Provisions and Development Standards, Chapter 18.10, Design Standards, and Chapter 18.11, Parking and Loading Requirements.
Have a second, please.
I'll second it.
Let the record reflect that a motion was made by Commissioner Sanders and seconded by Commissioner Wagner.
Thank you.
Roll call, please.
Commissioner Sanders?
Aye. Aye.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Waggy?
Aye.
Commissioner Holberts?
Aye.
Commissioner Acey?
Aye.
Chairman Shanahan?
Aye,
Passes 5-0. Thank you.
thank you. So we are moving on to,
Thank you all.
thank you, Bruce.
Thanks, Bruce. Thanks, Cliff.
Thanks, Cliff.
Doesn't Melissa vote?
No,
Because there's a vacancy.
she's an alternate. Oh, where's my, I'm lost. I lost my agenda. Just bear with me. Okay, we are on, item 5.2, the housing element update kickoff presentation.
Yes, our first official meeting of our housing element update. So one of the first steps is to kick it off with the Planning Commission and City Council, but we didn't have time to do a joint meeting, so that'll occur later. Tonight, we have our team from Four Leaf. The city partnered with Four Leaf Incorporated to handle our housing element update, and the team with them tonight is Luke and Takara. And I'm not sure if Jane is with them also. I think it's just Luke and Takara tonight.
That's correct.
Okay. And so they're going to go into way more depth than I will, but yeah, just in general, this is the city's start of our 6th cycle housing element. In general, they're 8-year increments. We are closing on the end of the 5th cycle and coming up on the start of the 6th, which will start in 2023. And it has to be adopted, I believe, by January 2023. So our timeline is slightly crunched, but we think we can get it, and we got a good team in Four Leaf to help us wrap up this document. So I'll hand it over to Takara and Luke.
Great, thank you so much, Raphael. It's a pleasure to present this evening to the Planning Commission of the City of Cloverdale. My name is Luke Lindenbush, Housing Policy Planner with Four Leaf Inc. As Raphael mentioned, we have been contracted to deliver the housing element for the City of Cloverdale. I want to also note that tonight we're wearing a different hat as the coordinator of the Napa-Sonoma Regional Housing Collaborative in giving this kickoff presentation. So this is actually a presentation provided courtesy of ABAG MTC, the regional housing planning agency. So I'll get a little bit more into that in a bit. But first, just want to give an overview of what housing elements are, go into our agenda for the evening, go over sites inventory and other new laws that we're facing in the 6th cycle housing element go over some demographics that illustrate Cloverdale, go into the project timeline and the next steps that we'll be looking at over the next year or so, and then take some time for questions, discussion, and community input. So first off, what is a housing element? I'm sure that all of you have received a lot of information about this from your city's council and other sources on sort of the landscape of housing laws and the housing element, and many of you, I'm sure, have gone through the process as well. But a housing element is a part of the general plan, an element of the general plan that covers the 8-year planning period, in this instance from 2023 to 2031. And it's unique in a general plan element in the sense that it is the only one that requires certification from the state. So that's one of the reasons why the stakes are high. It entails a site inventory and assessing the needs to be able to meet the regional housing needs allocation. It implements policies and programs that allow for you to be able to accommodate your RHNA as a city. And it's a way that the state ensures that jurisdictions are upholding statutory requirements, including some new ones like affirmatively furthering fair housing and looking at constraints to building, whether political or environmental. Housing Elements 101. It's a state law that mandates the local governments adequately plan to meet existing and projected housing needs of all economic segments of the community. So this is really important in the sense that this isn't just the big RHNA number that every jurisdiction gets from the regional government passed down from the state, but it's also about making sure that every jurisdiction can adequately plan for all levels of housing, affordable housing and market rate. Going into some of the benefits of why it's really important to receive HCD certification as a city, it's really important for a variety of reasons to have the presumption of legal adequacy. If the city is litigated, having a certified housing element generally avoids a city from being sued and getting other involvement from the Attorney General in compliance with other state housing laws. And it's a way for the city to maintain discretionary review of her house. If a city's found not in compliance with the housing element update, then a city can lose local control. And we're aiming to make sure that you have a document that will make sure that you're able to retain that and make a plan that satisfies the needs that are mandated for Cloverdale and also works for Cloverdale. It's also really important to be certified to make sure that beyond housing, a jurisdiction is eligible for state funding, whether that's transit, pedestrian improvements, whole variety of funding that comes from the state of California that's tied up in the housing element. So going a little bit into RHNA, the regional housing needs allocation, we can see that there are the different categories that are listed on the basis of income. So for Cloverdale, Cloverdale has to plan for 74 very low income units, 43 low income units, 45 moderate income units, and 116 above moderate or market rate units. So that's 278 units in total that the city of Cloverdale has to plan for in the planning period leading up to 2031. It's really important to note that this is what a city must zone for. It's not saying that Cloverdale has to build 278 homes. Of course, the cities themselves don't build homes, but it's making sure that there is a reasonable and adequate accommodation to be able to, zoning to be able to accommodate a city's identified housing need. And these affordability assumptions are also linked to density and zoning. So part of why the RHNA process has been so much more talked about this time around is because the regional housing needs determination that every region gets from the state went up substantially this year. The last cycle, around 188,000 units. This year it was 441,000 units. So this increase of almost 135% is reflective of the housing crisis and affordability that we're seeing around the state of California. And it's also consistent with increases around the state. In fact, the Bay Area actually received more modest increases in comparison with some other jurisdictions, including Southern California. So again, looking at the RHNA in context of other cities around the county, you can see that it's pretty much in pace with other cities on the smaller end of the scale in Sonoma County, like Cotati and Sebastopol, in regard to the size of the allocation. So this is really just about what we would be expecting and regionally in proportion with what other jurisdictions have been receiving. Going through the RHNA process and timeline a bit, we're at the end here. So everything has been determined. It's gone through the Housing Methodology Committee. Final methodology and drafts have been provided. Appeals have been heard, and across the entire region, appeals have been denied. So this RHNA allocation is the final one that we're going to be seeing. So just again, looking through RHNA and how it gets us to where we're at here. This is the process as it pertains to the housing element listed in visual form. So now I want to take a little bit of time to go into some of the new state housing laws that are making this a little bit of a different process than we've seen in the past. I want to state very clearly that I'm not an attorney, so any advice that you receive on how this directly impacts the city of Cloverdale is best heard by your city attorney. But really the goal here is to go through the breadth of the scale of the housing element laws that we're seeing. So this doesn't include all of the ones that have passed. There's dozens just this year alone. So this is just to get a sense of sort of the scale of the kind of laws that we're looking at incorporating here, having to do with sites, constraints, compliance with the housing element itself, provisions for fair housing, homelessness, land use, and the housing needs section. So this is just to give a sense of really all of the different angles that we're looking at for increased scrutiny and making sure that the housing element is produced in compliance with state law. So one of the really big ones is AB 1397, and this goes into the sites inventory. These are the state requirements that identify whether a site is going to be suitable for inclusion in the housing element and accommodating the city's share of RENA. So this is an inventory of land that is both suitable and available. For affordable housing sites, the zoning has to accommodate a default density of 20 dwelling units per acre. This is determined on a jurisdictional basis. And this is part of the consideration for making sure that the city can accommodate affordable housing, so it can be built at the density that affordable housing is built at. There are some exemptions to get this that I'll be able to get into later, ways that adequacy can be provided at a lower density as well. But in short, local jurisdictions must identify enough housing sites to be able to accommodate the RENA, and the sites must meet new state requirements, including affirmatively furthering fair housing. So this means that all of the sites, especially the sites for affordable housing, can't all be concentrated in one area, in particular low-income census tracts. And housing also has to be dispersed throughout the community and included in high resource areas as well. So this is a little bit different for smaller jurisdictions than, say some of our larger cities that have more clear segregation throughout the city, but this is still a case for a city on the scale of Cloverdale. So additionally, going into the strong justification that's required, if there is a non-vacant site that has been used in the inventory before, if there's a site that's been used in the last two inventories but it hasn't been developed, or if a site is zoned for affordable housing and it's submitted in the housing element below the default density of 20 units per acre, there needs to be a strong justification that that site is actually going to be developed as it's intended and as it's promulgated in the housing element. So these limitations listed in AB 1397 are really looking at making sure if a site is reused, that there is a reasonable expectation that housing actually could be built there. In addition, it's important for every jurisdiction to zone for all types of housing. This includes apartments, triplexes, single residence occupancies, mobile homes, etc. This is just a sampling of the kinds of housing types that are allowed, but really the goal here is variety and making sure that a city is taking a varied approach and meeting its housing needs. So to go a bit into affirmatively furthering fair housing, also known as AFFH, the fair housing needs section really is a part of the housing element that has taken the center stage in the last housing element cycle, as it wasn't part of the fifth cycle. This was originally a federal program that was reinstated by the state, and it's enforced through the housing element. So programs must constitute meaningful actions to address disparities in housing needs and in access to opportunities. As I mentioned, with the sites, this means that sites have to be dispersed throughout the community. There has to be affordable housing zoned in high opportunity areas, and sites that are zoned for housing in lower income areas need to be accompanied by programs that create opportunities. So as was coming up in the last agenda item, affordable housing needs to be an access to schools, jobs, social infrastructure, transit, things like that. So it's not pushed to the margins of a community. That's what the goal of this is. So going a little bit more into the AFFH requirements, the city must collect and analyze data in regard to the fair housing issues and enforcement, identify existing patterns of segregation throughout a community and areas of racial or ethnic concentration, and identify fair housing policies and programs to implement them and hopefully prevent patterns of segregation from being advanced into the future. Going in a bit into the housing sites inventory, there's a variety of needs in terms of what the kind of requirements are for sites. So a lot of this has been mentioned already, but this is just kind of a table form going through what the law is that has been passed down, really what the goal of that is, and the kind of data that's required. So really the challenge when we're looking at a growing arena is that as sites get developed or become ineligible to be part of the housing element in each cycle, the amount of sites gets smaller. So this is the conundrum that we're dealing with in all of the jurisdictions that update their housing elements. One aspect of this that's important to consider as well is the no net loss law. So agencies must replace any site in an inventory if for low-income housing, if it develops as anything else. In short, this is basically just ensuring that a city doesn't zone for exactly what their arena is and then fall short if something develops as something else. So basically, it's important for a jurisdiction to maintain at that arena threshold for all different income levels. So if parcels develop as something up in housing, maybe it has flexible zoning, maybe it develops as less housing units than it was zoned for, then the city will still be in compliance with the housing element law and still have an adequate supply to be able to zone for the amount of the arena that is the amount of arena that is mandated over the entire 8-year period. And so if you do dip below any of the numbers in those arena categories because a site is developed as something else, Assembly Bill 72 does allow Housing and Community Development Department and the Attorney General to intercede, and there's potential for loss of local control. So in general, when we're preparing housing elements, we aim for about 130% of the arena overall and in each of the income categories to make sure that none of our jurisdictions fall below the threshold for the arena and are in jeopardy of losing local control. So I want to go in a bit into some of the expanded enforcement authority as well. This is something that we're not worried about because we're going to make sure to get the housing element in on time and have one that is compliant. But it's really important just to make sure that everybody is really aware of the stakes if compliance is revoked or not attained. So in both of these laws, there's a handful of different cases in which cases can be referred, jurisdictions can be referred to the Attorney General for non-compliance. That includes the housing element law itself, the Housing Accountability Act, the no net loss law, the density bonus law, fair housing laws, anti-discrimination laws, and additionally, with expanded rules in AB 215, there's a requirement for non-compliant jurisdictions to rezone within 1 year as opposed to the 4 years originally stipulated. And there's also requirements there's also an opportunity if jurisdictions are not in compliance with SB 35 and other streamlining laws that they will be subject to additional compliance or additional scrutiny from the state. And again, if they're not complying with affirmatively furthering fair housing in the site's inventory. So there's really a huge list here of reasons that the city of Cloverdale could be sued by the state if they're out of compliance in their housing element. But again, our goal is for that to not happen at all. So in terms of public outreach for the housing element, every single housing element really benefits from public outreach and engagement, really making sure that, again, this is about the mandates. This is coming from the mandates that the state is setting, and those requirements have to be met. But it's also an opportunity for every jurisdiction to imagine what the housing in the city is going to look like for the next 8 years. So public participation in the process is a given, but it's also something that is a statutory requirement. So we'll be going a little bit more into the end in terms of what the outreach plan looks like for the city of Cloverdale and how we're going to be approaching that. But it is required as part of the process, and it's also very important. It's also important for, in this upcoming housing element, for streamlined ministerial approval to be allowed. There are certain laws in which housing can be approved ministerially, and local review and discretion is not part of the equation anymore. So it's important for every jurisdiction to be able to have the most control as possible over this process by having objective design and development standards by the end of the year. So if this is not the case, then it's possible for rezoning again to be taken over by the state. However, it's our understanding that the city of Cloverdale is on track to get these objective design and development standards adopted to be able to be in compliance with these laws. So I just want to give a high-level overview of some of the demographics from American Community Survey and Census data that help define the city of Cloverdale. This is all going to be in the housing element. So again, this is maybe the first time you're going to see some of this, but it's not the last, and there will be opportunities to go over all of this. So really just looking at the population trends for the city of Cloverdale, we can see that there was a protracted amount of development at the turn of the millennium that was at a faster rate than Sonoma County or the Bay Area as a whole, slowed down in the Great Recession, but nonetheless, more units per capita produced in the last 20 years than Sonoma County or the region. We can also see that Cloverdale has more children over the last 20 years, and especially young children. You can see this with the expansion of schools and other things. And you can also see that that Cloverdale also has an aging population. Again, looking at households by the presence of children, Cloverdale has 6% more houses with kids in it than Sonoma County, and 2% more than the Bay Area as a whole. And 20% of seniors in Cloverdale are living with a disability. So when we're looking at the housing needs of seniors and their specific housing needs, disabilities are certainly a factor in that are important to consider as we're looking at the housing element and housing needs that are going to be suited for this population. In regard to housing tenure, we can see Cloverdale has a slightly higher degree of owner-occupied residents than Sonoma County or Bay Area as a whole, largely due to more home ownership opportunities in general in the region. And housing tenure by age, we can see as people get older, the higher likelihood is that they're going to be owner-occupying their home, indicating an opportunity for more ownership opportunities for younger Cloverdale residents as well. Looking at households by household income level, Cloverdale, in comparison with Sonoma County and the Bay Area, has less residents that are extremely low income and very low income, and a significantly higher share of residents that are in the low income category, 50 to 80% of AMI. So this will be something to consider as well in addressing housing needs. And household income level by tenure, we can see a vast majority of people who are making above area median income own their home, and the lower income you are, the more likely you are to be a renter. Looking at housing tenure by housing type as well, detached single family homes, vastly owner occupied, multifamily housing, vastly renter occupied is the takeaway here. And size by tenure, we can see that there's higher likelihood in the 2 to 3 to 4 member households to be owner occupied, and the larger a house get, more likely to be renter occupied. And we also see a larger amount in general of 3 to 4 bedroom homes in Cloverdale. Wanted to add some statistics in here about overcrowding as well, acknowledging the difference between overcrowding and severe overcrowding with more than 1.5 occupants per room. Again, a lot more renters in overcrowded homes in Cloverdale than owners. And looking at overcrowding severity, you can see that 9% of Cloverdale residents are living in overcrowded housing, and a smaller portion of them are in severely overcrowded housing than overcrowded housing. And overcrowding by race, we can see a large racial disparity in terms of overcrowding in Hispanic and Latinx residents and residents of more than one race as well. And looking at cost burden by income level, everything that's cost burdened is considered over 30%, 30 to 50% represented in the green, and severely cost burden represented in the purple bar, with over 50% of a household's income used for housing. So we see that more than half of residents below 50% of AMI are severely cost burdened. About half of residents that are in the low income category are cost burdened. And even moderate income residents, about a third are cost burdened, and about 10% of even those above making moderate income, above the area median income, cost burdened as well. In cost burden by tenure, we see again a stronger likelihood of renters being cost burdened, with 2/3 of renters in Cloverdale burdened by the cost of housing. It's still as much as 30% of owners burdened by the cost of housing as well. So now I'm just going into giving another big overview of the housing element needs. So we have the identified housing needs that are passed down through the regional government from the state and RHNA. That process is done. We've looked at the statutory requirements, the new laws, and affirmatively furthering fair housing. The process that begins now with our kickoff and continues throughout the entire process is community input. So that'll be informing our process throughout the entire housing element update. And we'll also be returning to the Planning Commission and City Council with policies, programs, and sites inventory in the coming months. So looking at project objectives, again, here the goal is to meet local housing needs. This really isn't just about the mandates. This is really about taking those mandates and creating a plan that works for Cloverdale and addresses the needs that Cloverdale has. So this is a document that really has a lot of room for creativity, for innovation, for the type of specific local knowledge that every member of this commission and every member of this community has. So really this is about catering those programs and policies that are mandated to meet the specific community needs. It's also an objective to ensure adequate sites, making sure that the inventory of sites can accommodate the REIT allocation. And again, more and more creative policies will allow a broader range of site options as we review those site locations through the enhanced scrutiny of the affirmatively furthering fair housing lens. And after we do this, then it is our goal and our intent to achieve state certification by the deadline of January 31st, 2023. So looking at the next steps, we have outreach and community input. The kickoff now is just the beginning, as I said, and we'll be having a survey, initial community survey going out to the community this month, and gaining community input over the course of the process. We'll also be continuing to do data collection, looking at the issues, constraints, and opportunities to housing in Cloverdale. In a couple months, in early spring, we'll be coming back with the draft housing strategy and preliminary sites inventory, and including a fair housing analysis and affirmatively furthering fair housing program of actions as well. After that will come the draft housing element, and again, there will be another period of public review. And in this cycle, HCD has 90 days to review, and there will be adoption hearings leading up to next January of 2023 as well. So again, just a different form of looking at that timeline. Starting here at the kickoff workshop, every purple colored dot in this work plan is an opportunity for community input. So really, this is just the beginning in terms of the feedback we're going to be wanting to get from the community, and we'll have our initial community survey, but that's not the only time that we're going to be hearing from the community as well. As we begin those stakeholder interviews as well with different members of the community and the business community, nonprofit community, and residents, collecting data on all of this, conducting additional outreach activities and community events and things of the like. Moving to the draft housing strategy and the preliminary sites assessment, again, we'll be coming back to you to present on that. And that'll be in the public workshop represented in the middle there. And then that, once we've received feedback from the commission, from the council, and from the community, we'll have the draft housing element prepared for HCD review. Then we'll do the CEQA documentation, HCD 90-day review, revisions, have hearings to adopt, and then eventually get the housing element certified. So as I mentioned at the beginning, Sporleaf is contracted to deliver the housing element for the city of Cloverdale. We're also contracted to coordinate the Napa-Sonoma Sub-Regional Housing Collaborative. That is who is funding my presence here tonight in giving the kickoff presentation to the city of Cloverdale, as we've done to a variety of jurisdictions in the Napa and Sonoma County, in Napa and Sonoma County. So we're working with all 16 jurisdictions to provide technical assistance throughout the housing element update. This is a program that is funded by one-time funding from the Regional Early Action Planning Grant. So every single county in the Bay Area and across the state has different ways that they are enhancing regional collaboration and coordination in their housing element efforts. And the collaborative up here is our effort. So this involves information collaboration, providing best practices, and we'll have a website launched this month as well that'll give residents throughout the region navigation to be able to get involved with each of their respective communities. The collaborative is also going to be helping each of the 16 jurisdictions in Sonoma and Napa counties with the regional fair housing analysis and helping to perform an affirmatively furthering fair housing section for each city. And this will be conducted this is being conducted in coordination with the Lawyers Committee out of Washington, D.C. And the goal with this is to make sure that all of our jurisdictions, especially our smaller jurisdictions, aren't caught off guard by new and strong requirements for fair housing sections in the housing element. The collaborative is also convening an equity working group to ensure that our outreach practices are coordinated across the two counties and also equitable, that they're reaching members of our community who usually aren't part of public planning processes, but should be. And we'll also be establishing a developer panel to validate sites. So when I discussed the 20 dwelling units per acre threshold for affordable housing, if there's a site that really isn't going to be able to accommodate that, but the community still thinks it's a good site for housing, this is an area where we'll be able to validate those sites and say, have local developers with regional experience, be able to come in and say whether or not that's actually feasible for development at lower density. So that's one example of a way that we're going to be able to get somewhat of a free certification from HCD by making sure to have a really rigorous set of standards that we run this through, including with the developer panel. So with that, we're prepared to take any questions, discussion, and public input. As mentioned by Raphael, I'm joined this evening by my colleague Tukara Nicole Thomas, our Deputy Director of Planning. So either of us are happy to answer any of your questions, and thank you very much.
Thank you. Do we have any questions? Yes, none?
Yeah, I have a question. So this question I know has been answered before, but I get the same question over and over. And the question is, in regard to AB 72 and AB 215, what is the reality of the city of Cloverdale for non-compliance with these laws and bills and whatnot?
Like if we don't actually meet the numbers?
If you don't meet the numbers, or if you disregard the no net loss law and this and that, if some of these things are developed into projects that are not low income or very low income or whatnot. So what's the reality of that?
Well, the ultimate goal is to get a certified housing element. And the reason for that is they basically tie a lot of grant funding to that. So we've been receiving some grant funding for parks, things like that. One of the first boxes you check is, do you have a certified housing element? We put a lot of things into the housing element, just like the general plan. We strive to meet those, but we don't always meet all of those. I just want to take a step back. I mean, one of the big, as Luke said, the big functions of this exercise is to look at our RENA number that they've assigned us and make sure that we have enough land to accommodate that number of units, which seemingly we will be able to. But if for some reasons it could end up in potential rezoning of sites if we can't demonstrate that we can accommodate that number of units. Also, Luke, you can jump in here anytime, but if through our demographic analysis we identify a certain subset in that analysis, we should have policies and goals about that. Say, for example, we have an inordinate number of overcrowding, then we should really have policies that address that in the housing element. So if we don't comply with it, I mean, really the goal is to get a certified housing element, and that's going to be us going through this, sending it to the state, going back and forth with them over a few things, typically getting the certified housing element, and then every year Rafael does his housing element and housing report, where we report to the state on our progress. And normally we can list every single goal in there and what progress we made. But with the new laws, they are making it a little more, I wouldn't say punitive, but a little bit more, what's the word I'm looking for here? They're enforcing it a little bit more, trying to get us to do more by way of implementation of the housing element.
Okay, thank you.
AB 1397 says, new limitations on the reuse of sites listed in current housing element. What does that mean?
So I'll let Luke, do you mind kicking or I'll catch, picking up where I kind of leave off with this one. But so before, when we do a housing element, you have to come up with a list of sites that could potentially take, these numbers that RENA gives us. Where can we put all these numbers? And you can't always put them on one property. There's going to be a list of properties throughout the city that they can go on. And historically, some sites haven't gotten developed in years and years and years, and that might last 2 planning cycles, 3 planning cycles. And so some of those properties have been on this list, for maybe a couple cycles. And so the state is definitely getting a lot more strict on that and looking at what we can and can't use from our last housing element list and what we can use as far as recycling sites. But it's a lot harder to basically reuse those. And yeah, Luke, do you want to explain what the difficulty is in reusing those old sites and getting our new list?
Absolutely. So if it's been included in the last two housing elements, that's where the strong justification needs to be provided. And there's also a little bit of a high standard put on what defines a vacant site. So if it's a parking lot or if it's a demolished site, then it doesn't technically count as vacant. Vacant actually just has to be raw land. So there's a little bit of that hurdle as well. There needs to be strong justification provided. But it's also not the be-all, end-all. It can still be included if it's been in the past two cycles. That's another area where, again, the collaborative product of the developer panel comes in. So if there is renewed interest on a site, if there's a letter from the owner of the parcel, something like that that can really indicate to HCD that there's actual likelihood that it's going to be developed. And what HCD is looking for is for jurisdictions not to just be putting the same sites on there over and over again that are never going to be developed. So if there's something that really is viable and there's some way to prove it, it should be good to go.
Isn't that sort of dependent on the market?
It's all dependent on the market. I mean, one of the overarching goals of this is really a check on the city to make sure we're not putting barriers to housing. It's not on.
Can you repeat that? I really can't hear anything you're saying right now.
The question was, isn't it up to the market to decide? And I was agreeing with that, and then just kind of further saying that the goal of the housing element is really the state's check on the cities and counties to make sure that they're not putting barriers to housing. So you go through this exercise, but we're not on the hook to build the housing. It's just, here's what we think the growth is going to occur in Cloverdale. Demonstrate to us that you can accommodate that and you have the correct zoning. You don't have, overly stringent design reviews. Your fees are in line with other cities. You're not picking sites that have wetlands all over them. You're not continuing to pick the same site over and over, that parcel on the south end of town that nobody will ever build on. So it's really an exercise in the city demonstrating that we can accommodate what has been, designated for us in our regional housing needs assessment.
Well, we know we can accommodate. So my question is, my understanding is you're also potentially making recommendations to developers, correct? And even looking at developers for certain project that could fit within your recommendation of your study that you're gonna present to us later, correct?
So that developer panel is to justify any sites that might be on the edge. With the sites inventory, we do anticipate, because there are, with the number of the RENA and the amount of projects that are in the pipeline for Cloverdale, that it shouldn't be too difficult to be able to meet those sites. So that might not be a factor, but that is one thing to consider. Yeah.
So my recommendation would be a couple points, and I don't know if it's the time for us to speak, Commissioner Shanahan, or Chair Shanahan, but are we allowed to discuss? Is that what you're asking for us now?
So this is definitely not the last time that we'll be coming to you. This is just the kickoff presentation. So we'll have a lot of opportunities to get your input, and specifically on the sites inventory and the draft housing strategy. Those two components will be presented to the Planning Commission in early spring.
My question is for Chair Shanahan, are we allowed to discuss this, or are we still under their report?
We haven't opened up to public, so we can, we can discuss now.
I can't hear you. What was that?
We haven't opened up to public yet, but we can discuss. If you have questions you want to discuss now.
And Chair, I just want to note that Takara was going to make a comment.
Yes. Yeah.
Thank you. I just wanted to kind of back us up a little bit, right? And to give a little bit more context. Us giving this kickoff presentation has kind of laid a foundation to show you all the different pieces of information all the different data points that we're going to take to really get a solid housing element that's going to really serve Cloverdale, right? We don't want a plan that's going to live on the shelf. So walking through all of those laws and there's tables to kind of give you that context and say, there's a lot going on. HCD has a really, really strong eye on every community's housing element to make sure they're not going to do a plan on the shelf, right? But throughout that process, we are definitely going to be your partners. We're definitely going to get a lot of community outreach. We're definitely going to make sure that when we're putting together the sites inventory, that those sites are, viable, even though the city is not going to build those sites. We want to make sure that when we present this information to HCD, they accept it, right? And so we're going through all these different steps of the process we're kind of almost, I like it as using like a sledgehammer for a hammer for a penny nail, right? And we're really going over, above, and beyond. I heard there was a question earlier. Forgive me, I don't know which commissioner asked it. It's a little bit muffled on my end, but they wanted to kind of drill down a little bit more on the AB 72, I believe it was, question about what's the chance of us being out of compliance. I can't guarantee anything, but I will say that if we follow the process, which we will, and we go through all of these different pieces of information gathering, the public participation process, work with city staff, work with you all at the Planning Commission, so on and so forth, I can foresee us having a very strong housing element. My crystal ball is broken, so I can't say that we're not going to be out of compliance, but I feel very confident that we'll give you all a plan that won't veer into that pathway. There was one more point I think I wanted to make about this. My thoughts escape me at the moment, but I'll start right there and kind of pause and see if there's any other questions or thoughts that you all want to kind of talk through. I think we're at the point Luke has finished his presentation where we're available to you all to kind of talk through some of these items.
Thank you. Chad?
Yeah, I mean, I really appreciate your efforts. I truly believe that this is the smart way of developing our city without sprawling all over our beautiful land here, just to kind of strategically place the proper type of housing. I do want you to kind of keep in mind when you're thinking of our city and you're taking this back and you're developing your study and your recommendations, and that is that we're siloed. We're 20 minutes from here or there. And so, as we have affordable housing needs, we need to be able to provide certain services with them, just basic living needs with them. And so we need to strategically have commerce embedded with living to allow that, because we're siloed. We're also siloed just from our city itself. It's a long one-lane stretch. And so proper development to not just be on one road and to kind of put services in different areas needs to improve in our city to allow a more strategic growth. I was a part of a community in another state, and because of the Olympics, it blew up, and now it's just a mess because it was one road. And I hope we don't go down that same path and become that, because if we grow, we need to grow strategically. So keep that in mind, and hopefully you can kind of come up with a cool plan that can embed that and really help the community out. I appreciate your efforts.
Of course. And I'm hearing you. I'm over here taking notes, and I really want to kind of hammer home the point that really think of us as the shepherds for creating the housing element. Your community is going to tell us through the public participation process. Staff is going to guide us, going to be there with us every step of the way. I think we have over 9 formal touch points for community participation, public outreach. But then throughout the entire process, almost 2-year-long process, because we're targeting January 2023 to get it out, we'll be taking public participation throughout the entire part. And, my personal philosophy why I got into planning is we are here for our community members, right? Without them, we're nothing. So I just really want to hammer home that we are going to make sure that we hear your community and that it's your plan. We're just doing the work, putting it together on paper for the community, and making sure that we follow the laws the inordinate amount of laws that we got to go through.
Yeah, and one last point, I have one last comment, and that is, in your presentation, you highlighted something I've never captured yet, and that is the high percentage of disability residents we have in Cloverdale. And so that priority and making sure that that's embedded in some recommendations for development should be included, that I haven't really thought in my own thought process. So I'm going to be keeping in mind more and more disabled, or at least dedicated disabled units per project, just and the accessibility of those units. I'm always thinking, put retail down below and housing on top. That doesn't work for disability. So, I think that needs to be a recommendation passed along through your report as well.
We're over here taking notes. Like it says, 2-year process. We have plenty of opportunity, but I hear you loud and clear. Make sure that that is captured.
Thank you. Anything else from commissioners? Commissioner Spangler, you have any comments?
Not at this time.
Okay, thank you. Well, this time I'd like to open it up to the public if we have any out there. Lori, are you with us?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, do we have any hands in public?
I see none. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we'll bring it back to the commission. This being a kickoff, this is my second one, so this is exciting. So, long time. It's a long process. We go through a lot. So, wear your bootstraps because it gets really kind of fun into the second year. So, do we have anything we need to know? Kevin,
We'll be back.
Yeah, we'll be back.
This is, again, just to describe what they're going to do, and they'll come back with recommendations and things for us to review, and we'll be reaching out with their survey, trying to get the word out as best we can. It's very short, which is nice, and so we'll get as much public input as we can. And
the survey going to be online like it was?
Online.
Well,
It's
last time we did it, we mailed, but we only mailed
It's
out
online this time.
500.
They want to get it out any way we can.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that we mentioned even door hangers in high concentrated areas, apartments, things like that. So,
Okay.
yeah, any recommendations? I think they're open to
Okay.
hearing them too.
It'll be in Spanish too.
It will be in, other than English also?
Yeah.
Yeah, we have Spanish and English.
Yeah, because it was, if I remember correctly, last time we didn't get a really big push from the the townspeople. It was very limited.
I could be wrong, but I think housing is a hot topic now.
That's what I'm hoping. We get it out there now. How will we get it out there so
Be careful
everybody's
what you
aware
ask
of it?
We'll
Yeah,
do our
I
best.
just when I look at, well, we had 6,800 people when we did this last, and we got 42 responses.
Wow.
It was, so.
I have a question. If you meet your RENA numbers, if you meet all of your RENA numbers, is there an incentive for the city? If you meet your RENA numbers, if the city, our city, is able to meet the RENA numbers, is there any incentive or is there anything for that? I'm just curious.
We
Like
did.
That's a really good question. I've never heard that question answered. So we can get you some details on that. I know that it's very clear about what happens if you do not.
Right.
And we are trying to make sure that we plan for, I think Luke said 130% above RENA. But Luke, have you heard anything about incentives for going over?
So there are some that, in terms of streamlining provisions, where previously jurisdictions that had met their RENA were exempt from some of the laws like SB 35 and streamlined multifamily housing, and that is no longer the case going into 2022, from my understanding. However, it's also just important to acknowledge that RENA is a planning exercise, so it's not the maximum amount of housing that a community can build. It's really the floor and not the ceiling. So if the community has the need for more housing and wants to build more housing, it's going to be to the benefit of their community. So I don't think it can be overdone in some way. But that being said, we'll definitely look into seeing if there are other state incentives for surpassing RENA, and get back to you on that.
I know one thing had been discussed. Do you know, Luke or Takara, if anything has been come further about, most jurisdictions historically throughout the state don't meet the RENA, but the potential to carry over. I thought that there was some talk about that. If say we do meet our RENA and we build 500 units and we built basically 200 something more, would we be able to take those 200 and apply into the next cycle, housing category, housing cycle 7? Did that go anywhere? Did you guys hear about that being talked about a little bit?
So there was a bill that was presented this year. It did not pass.
Oh, okay. I guess it could come back, but it didn't get passed. Okay. That would be one incentive, but I guess it didn't go anywhere.
Well, the only incentive I know is when we did hit our numbers in 2009, was it?
We did. Huh?
We were invited to a beautiful dinner at Skyhawk
Hey,
restaurant.
Commission, I'll be honest, just as a public off here, we can't hear anything you guys are talking about. The other presenters could probably vouch for it, because if you're not speaking into the mic, we can't. Your masks make it impossible to understand you.
I was saying the only reward we got when we hit our numbers last time was a nice dinner out with the county and the newspapers and an award from the supervisors. So, but that was last time around.
I have a question. So this question is regarding the city annexing additional properties into the city limits and how that affects the arena allocations. So if we were to annex additional properties and they were developed, does that change the number that the city has by that many? And if so, does it change the unincorporated county arena numbers?
I'll just start. That's a good question. Just by way of example, the Baumgartner project. There was actually talk about that because that happened just in the last year, and while this RENA cycle was going down, and there was talk about that between the city and the county doing kind of a swap. And I think that actually can still kind of happen, kind of quote unquote off the table. That was talked about at the appeal cycle, and on the formal level, that wasn't agreed to. But I think, that doesn't mean that the city and the county couldn't come up with our own land swap, so to speak. So I think that could, something like that could happen, in the future. But I don't know, Luke and Dakar, how would you guys answer that? Like, the example that I gave was just something that happened simultaneously that was happening while, we annexed some property and the RENA was coming out. So that was talked about. But, say in 4 years when we're in the middle of our cycle, how does that work? I mean, I guess it's, we don't increase our RENA and the county doesn't. I guess it's just kind of, they lose some land and we gain some land. It's
I've never seen RENA numbers change in mid-cycle.
Yeah, mid-cycle, I don't think.
I have heard of counties and cities kind of using the same, splitting it if it gets annexed, but I've never heard of RENA numbers changing in between the 7-year cycle.
So you're saying no?
Probably
I think
not.
so. I think I'm
Okay,
saying
so
no.
if we do annex more properties in and develop on 500 more or whatever, then that's good for us.
Kind of, yeah. Because we
Right.
get more land to deal with the same numbers.
Right, so even though the property may have been listed on the unincorporated county as available property, identified on the list or whatever, that it counts for us, not for the county, right?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question. Are these numbers per cycle, what phase of construction do those need to be in? Do they have to be completed? Do they just have to be approved for building?
Those,
So the
go ahead,
HCD is
Luke.
pretty flexible in terms of how those are accepted, as long as they haven't been used in a previous cycle. So usually it's permitted, and it doesn't have to be built or occupied to be able to counter that cycle.
Thank you.
Anything else, commissioners? No? Okay. Okay. Well, thank you very much. Looking forward to working with you guys.
Thanks very much, Luke Takara.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, so our next item is communication from public. Is this going to be a long item?
No, it's not. It's just to inform
I
you
didn't know
about.
if we break up here or not. Okay.
No,
so-
normally that goes in the front of the agenda, but it's just to let you know that the planning commission did receive a communication from the school district. I think you all received that and were made aware of that, so.
Okay, so we'll open it up to the communication from public. Was that it? Do you guys want to have any discussion on it? We all read the letters, saw the PDF, the PowerPoint. We understand there's needs, and somehow we got to figure this out, so. Anything, Commissioner Spangler, Commissioner Acey?
Nope, nothing on my end.
Okay. Okay, so with that, we go to planning report communications.
Okay, so the main thing I wanted to bring up under Director's Report is the next date for our Planning Commission is January 4th, and we are closed, City Hall will be closed between Christmas and New Year's, so I was going to suggest if the commission was open that we could do a special meeting, and you may not know your availability right now, but I can follow up with an email suggesting some dates. The main item will likely be the return of the Alexander Valley Apartments, who is anxious to get back before the Planning Commission. So normally we might be able to cancel it, but we've kind of made a commitment to them to have them come back. So if you're open to it, Chair, I can send out an email. I mean, a likely date could just be a week later, which would be January 11th. I understand you may not know if you're available right now, but that would be my first choice, or my first suggestion would be a 1 week later, January 11th.
Okay. Any objection to that?
No.
No? Good? Okay. Okay, yeah, so we'll do that.
Okay, so we'll schedule a special Planning Commission meeting for January 11th, Tuesday. Okay, so again, it'll be the Alexander Valley Apartments. Tomorrow night at the City Council, there's a appointment of a new Planning Commissioner. Her name is Madeline Wallace, and she's the mayor's selection. She was the sole applicant for this opening at this time, so hopefully tomorrow she will be appointed as an alternate commissioner, and we look forward to seeing Ms. Wallace at the Planning Commission. Again, we'll be back with more on the housing element, of course. You can tell that was a big process, and there was a lot of information there that came down pretty quick, but we'll get a little slower, and you'll be able to dive into what the policies are as we get deeper into it. Also, I'm really happy to announce that our new city clerk, Jill Garibaldi, will be starting Monday, so we won't have our city manager will be excused from our planning commission meetings, although I really super appreciate the help, because we're all hands on deck at this point, but Jill will be starting Monday, and she'll be clerking the planning commission as well as the city council.
Good lady.
Yeah. End of report.
Okay, well, thank you. We have any direction from planning commissioners to staff?
I have a question. You could just direct me on this, but for broadband, if I want to know what the city is doing with broadband, would that be with the subcommittee for the for the Public Works Department?
What's any specific?
I just want to know, because there's a lot of funding right now going around with broadband, and I don't know if there's any plans with the city on doing anything with broadband.
Well, there was some, we're also receiving the American Rescue Funds, and that was one of the, and we haven't really, the council hasn't settled on all the use of that, but that was one of staff's suggestions, was to bring more broadband into the courtyard and potentially City Hall. But, you know, and then we did our small cell ordinance, which is also sort of related to broadband, but I mean, I'm happy to, you know, entertain your questions. Maybe we can develop some questions, and that might be a topic for a subcommittee. Those are kind of things off the top of my head related to broadband.
Thank you.
Anything else?
Not for me.
Not for you, Chad, Melissa?
Nothing at this time.
Okay, thank you. Okay, with that, then I will adjourn this meeting to our next meeting, January 11th. And
Thank
thank
you.
you. Thank you, guys.